Hello and welcome to our February 3T at 3 series event covering the topic of using VDI to improve your hybrid work. I'm Allen Falcon, CEO of Cumulus Global, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day and week to join us, whether you're joining us here live for the session or you're watching this recording of the session on demand. Before we get into the topics at hand today, a couple of housekeeping issues. A reminder that the audio is muted to prevent any background noise from interfering with the session here today. So if at any point in time you have a question or a comment, along the top or right-hand side of your screen, there's a questions icon that'll open a window that'll alert me that there's a question, helps me track who's asked what, and make sure we get everything answered before we wrap up. I tend to try and take those in line with the content, but we also will have time for Q&A at the end of the presentation as well. As with all of our live events, the session is being recorded. We generally get them posted within 24 hours. We'll send you a note with the link. Feel free to share with others who you think might find the content valuable today. The 3T at 3 series is one of many resources we offer in the Resource Center on our website. We also have a Coffee and Cloud series. These are shorter 10 to 15 minute, maybe 20-minute sessions that cover topics very specific in detail, in and out. We also have a number of resources you can tap that'll get delivered to your inbox. Our monthly newsletter. We have also weekly updates related to Microsoft Cloud and Google Workspace, where you can get helpful tips and tricks, ideas and information about whichever platform you might be using as your productivity suite. And of course, we blog several times a month on topics that we're hearing are relevant to small business owners and leaders as well. So feel free to check out our resource center at your convenience. And if there's anything you're interested in that we're not covering, let us know. We love to have our content directed by our audience as well. So diving into the topic at hand, the first thing I want to start is with a couple of definitions. And first, I want to talk about remote desktop, because this terminology has been around the longest. And historically, it was used to simply connect to and use a desktop computer in another location. And so some of us might be old enough to remember PC Anywhere software, where if you had your PC running with the PC Anywhere host software at the office, and you happen to have a PC at home and a modem, you could dial up, connect, and remotely control the office PC from home. And it's still used, and that type of system still available. But when we talk about remote desktop today, we're talking about any mechanism to connect from a local desktop or other device to a physical or virtual desktop computer in another location. And so while this historically was a physical computer connection, today it's most often a virtual computer, which some organizations will run. So you may have heard of Citrix servers, for example. They might run those internally in their data center or in their computer room to provide access to the local area network and local applications and servers. We also do this now in the cloud, and that's really where we're going to be focused as well. And so the effect of a remote desktop is saying that it's either a physical or virtual computer somewhere that's in the environment with which you need to work, and you're accessing it remotely. And what's going over the wire in a secured channel way is the data you enter, so your mouse movements, your keyboard clicks, camera, audio, video that's coming from your machine. And what's coming back to you is what would be normally on the screen, and that feedback, as well as sound you might hear or the ability to view videos, things of that nature. What's not happening on the remote computer is any processing. All of the processing, all of the applications, all of the data, those are staying on that physical or virtual computer you're connected to. Your local machine is just an I/O device, and that has some specific advantages that we'll get into in a little bit more detail as we move forward. The next definition is the virtual desktop infrastructure, or VDI. This term's newer. It was actually coined by VMware to talk about end user virtualization. And basically, you create a virtualized desktop. It can be in a hosted, VMware envisioned it in a hosted data center or in an on-site private, local data center using their software and systems. But we see other ways to deploy those, and we'll talk about those and how those work. But effectively, that virtualized desktop is what's running and managed in a data center, whether it's a traditional data center, computer room, or a cloud service like Google Cloud Platform or Azure. with the Azure Windows Desktop service. Those end user devices are accessible via a network. You might want a VPN. Many of the services now that we can offer come with a secure encrypted client that doesn't necessarily require an additional VPN layer of security and performance hit. And the important thing is that as a user and people using your VDI environment, they're interacting with the systems and the applications as if they were running locally. So it has that look and feel and performance of a local machine, but everything's happening remotely in a secure environment. Also, with more recent technology, we look at end user device, not just being a PC or a laptop. It can be a tablet, it can be a Macintosh, it can be a smartphone, and not only providing access with secure thin client software or an agent that you install on your local machine, but also being able to access it through a web browser. And that has some pluses and some drawbacks for that type of access, and we can get into those as well. So those are two definitions. Now, when we focus on VDI adding value, we're really talking about a deployment where the remote desktops you're connecting to are in a cloud environment. And why do we think that's best, particularly for small and mid-sized businesses? Because you don't have to manage the infrastructure and the overhead. So, and we'll rely on the Azure, as the example for today. With Azure's Windows Desktop environment and the services we deploy, we can spin up and scale up the number of virtual desktops you need. It's on a private network within the Azure, ecosystem. On that network, we can also install application servers and other systems that you need to access in your environment, effectively replacing the on-site. So if you're, for example, running an accounting system and your equipment's about to age out, and you're looking at a significant, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 investment to replace and upgrade the server and the disk array and the backup system and the other security and your domain controllers, things that you need to run a full on-site environment. We've talked in other webcasts about lift and shift. We can move that from physical services in your computer room or your closet up into Microsoft Azure and to replace servers with services. And when we do that, we could VPN and have your people actually running on their local desktops, but that network connection is going to be slower with the processing and the data going over the network. Instead, moving to a VDI environment, your local computers are just being used as effectively smart terminals, otherwise known as a thin client. All the processing, all the data is in that secure network in the cloud. Now, why do we like it, and how does VDI add value? And just realize when we talk about VDI, we're talking about the concept of VDI and having that virtual desktop in the cloud, and the remote desktop component that lets your employees and your staff and your consultants connect into it. And so one of the benefits we see of moving it into the cloud and not having it on-premise is that you get a consistent user experience. Hybrid work is here to stay. It's part of the norm now. Now, whether or not you're debating how many days a week people should be in the office or be able to work from home or remotely, whether or not you have employees who will be in office and out of office at times and others who are always remote and always who are in office, one of the challenges, particularly when people move between the office and remote locations, is that the user experience isn't consistent. How they connect to the network, how they access the applications and the servers will be different. And that's particularly true if there are additional steps they need to connect when they're remote to get to that local on-premise network. And that connection to get them to your on-premise network requires a lot of infrastructure. All of that infrastructure is embedded in the Azure cloud and in that environment. So whether someone's in the office or they're away, they turn on their laptop or their computer, they click on the connection agent, the thin client, or they open the browser and go to the URL, they log in and they're there. The way they access information, when they copy something to their desktop, it's the same experience. They know where the file is going to end up. There's no confusion. And you have less requirements about that laptop, and we'll get into that in a second. So that consistent user experience is really important. Next is a lot of small businesses want to do BYOD. And we're great proponents of it, but we always talk about the policies and procedures and the risks that come with it, right? And so it's great that, as a small business, you don't want to buy laptops for everyone. People have their own preferences. They own them already. They want to use their own. They don't want to have to have two devices. That's great. There's a lot of reasons for bring your own device. The challenge, of course, is you've got employees using personal devices. They're connecting to your business and your data. And even if you're not in a regulated industry now, state and federal laws do require some level of diligence on information protection and privacy protection. And so you're going to need to manage those BYOD devices. So if they're connecting directly to your network, then yeah, you've got to figure out how to approach and manage your employees so that you can install the right antivirus and endpoint protection, that you can install the VPN software they need, and any other tools that you need to secure your environment. When you move into the VDI world with remote desktop, that BYOD device of your employees is just an intelligent terminal, if you will. It's a thin client. Your data is not going to live on it. And in fact, you can prevent them from downloading data to it. When they're logged in, they're connected. When they're not, the business environment isn't there and accessible. And so it gives you manage the virtual images and the virtual desktops in that VDI environment so that you have the proper security, and you secure how people access the environment from their own device. But you really don't need to manage beyond some basic checks for compatibility and security. You don't need to manage the employee's life and how they configure and what systems and tools and protections they're running on their personal computer. And that's easier from a policy standpoint. It's easier from an employment contract. It's easier, we've worked with many companies who had employees quit and leave and then not respond to the company when the company wants to remove their software and their tools from that end user's computer, that former employer's computer. So you can avoid a lot of those issues as far as spending and effort to manage personal devices that are connecting to your network that could otherwise pose a risk. The VDI environment segments the security and segments and separates the personal from the business. And so there's a question here, can employees use personal systems to connect to the virtual desktop? Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the reasons we see virtual desktops being so effective, is that your employees can have whatever computer they want, and through that secure agent, thin client, or through the web browser, when they connect to the virtual desktop, that window, that application that's running, or that web browser that's running, provides the window to the secure desktop, all the applications, all the data. When they connect or disconnect, it's gone. It's not part of their personal environment. And so it offers the security. In fact, we see some companies who've used VDI, and the initial impetus was that all of their applications and data run in a Windows environment, and they hired employees who love Mac and have personal Macs and want to use those devices. So now those Macintosh users can connect to the VDI, get that Windows environment, work fully within Windows, but still use their Macintosh and not have to have a Mac for personal use and a PC for business use lugged around in their briefcase or their suitcase when they're traveling. Security. I've hinted at a couple of reasons why it's important. All of your apps and data are in the secure network. They're not running on that local device. And so you control the environment, you control the access, you control the permissions, and you can cut someone off if need be. And in addition to that, you protect against end user issues. So, and this is really important, right? Because if I'm connected remotely directly to my company's network or my company's environment over a VPN, let's say, and it's my personal computer, and a family member does something and I end up with malware on my computer, end up with ransomware. If I'm running OneDrive Desktop or Google Desktop, Google Drive Desktop, and sync is set up, even if it's the cached sync, those tools are going to walk that, ransomware is going to walk through the drive mappings, and it's going to encrypt everything in the cloud, right? As if it were local on my machine, right? And the only way to prevent those end user issues is mandating that you as a company have security tools installed and operational control over that personal laptop and most of your employees aren't going to want to do that. It's too invasive to their personal life. So having the VDI where, hey, their personal machine is there, there is no drive mapping from their local machine up into the cloud. They connect in and they work locally within that secure network in the Azure environment that we build for you, means that you're protected against users. If they do something that messes up their local machine, or they get hacked, or they get, ransomware, it's not going to permeate from their personal machine into the business environment. And a couple of questions about printing. Yes, VDI tools allow you to choose what resources on the local machine you want accessible from the virtual machine up in the cloud. Typically, we don't do disk. We do obviously the screen, the keyboard, mouse, audio, video, and printing. And so you do have the ability to say, hey, I'm using a virtual desktop in the cloud, but I'm going to print to the home printer that's on my home network or physically plugged into my computer at home. And so both of those are possible. The next added value is performance. And here it's great because the infrastructure within GCP and Azure in particular is so mature that it's easy to scale services to meet your needs, right? So you don't need to worry about upgrading physical equipment. So for example, we had many clients as they started moving to Windows 11 realized that their laptops were underpowered. They just didn't have enough processor or enough memory for their laptops and desktops, even though some of those machines were less than 3 or 4 years old, their normal life cycle, and had to do some early replacements and upgrades. That's not an issue with VDI. The performance demand on the local machine is really low because it's just the network, the screen, the keyboard, the sound, the I/O that's happening. It's not the actual applications running and all the data being cached and managed. The virtual hosts can be scaled. We can start and say, each virtual host has, a certain number of core processors and so much memory allocated to it. But if you've got high performance users, they can be part of an environment that gives them more processor and more memory as they need. And we can balance that and match it. The other thing we can do is we can scale services to the number of people who need them at any particular point in time. And this is a huge, huge advantage against, versus running VDI and remote desktop in-house, as some companies have done, or even in a traditional hosted type of data center, in that you don't need the physical infrastructure. You don't have to buy or maintain or lease the physical infrastructure necessary for your maximum capacity. So let's say you're a 20-person company and most of the day you've got 16 to 18 people who need access to this, a particular application that's running. We can scale that at night and over the weekends. There are a couple people on call, you need 2 or 3. We can schedule it so that there are available virtual desktops for those 2 to 3 people 24 hours a day, and additional virtual desktops and host servers that run them scale up as people log in. Now, if you are building that infrastructure in a hosted data center or on site, you would need the equipment and the capability to have all 20 connections available all the time. In Microsoft Azure and GCP, we can scale it up based on actual usage and demand as well as time schedules so that you're only running and paying for the maximum number of servers and virtual desktops when they're needed. And when they're not needed, you scale down and your hourly charges, decrease. And so it manages cost, but can also manage performance. And again, by stipulating, the ratio of end users to CPU and memory allocation, we can scale the services to meet the performance needs for groups of users without having to overbuy and overpurchase for maximum load or worst case scenario, which is what you need to do when you're building it in-house or using a traditional hosted data center. And so this is really the cost. So there's cost benefits in a number of areas. One, so long as there's no physical damage to the end user devices and they're running, you will have an increased lifespan for those end user devices, right? They don't, my VDI environment doesn't care if my local machine is Windows 10 or Windows 11. so it doesn't care that my Windows 10 has 8 gig and I haven't upgraded to Windows 11 where you really need 16 gig to run efficiently, right? It's fine with my Windows 10 laptop still connecting. In fact, it's fine with my iPhone. It's fine with a Chrome device, or a Lenovo ThinBook, or thin client device, or a tablet. It just doesn't care, right? You need basic level of performance for the screen I/O and the communication speed, but you're more apt to be bound by Wi-Fi performance or your home internet connection than you are the actual device. So you won't be replacing company-owned devices as frequently. And if users are bringing bringing their own device, they won't be or feel compelled or obligated to spend money to upgrade prematurely or faster than they would normally. So it saves money in those aspects. The other way it saves money is, again, as I talked about on the scaling process, is you're not buying or leasing infrastructure to accommodate your maximum load. You're paying for the services as you use them, and those services can be scaled and managed in a way that manages the cost and keeps the cost affordable. At the same time, you're operating in a more secure environment, and you've got better resilience from disruption, right? So the fact that you're in a secure environment that's highly controlled, you're less susceptible to natural disasters and system outages, power outages in your building, local floods, things of that nature. If there's a natural disaster, the Microsoft and Google data centers are highly protected. Your people might not be able to work from where they are, from home or from their normal location. They can go someplace else. Again, all they need is a client, which can have this software installed or a browser and an internet connection, and they're able to do their job. And because you've got tighter security and you're in a secure network environment, even though people are using their own devices, you're less apt to be hit with ransomware or crypto or other types of malware. It's easier to protect yourself from intentional or accidental disruptions. And to a large extent, and really from a reliability standpoint, you're taking hardware reliability and in most cases communications reliability out of the mix as well. And so your business will be more resilient. And so costs between traditional networking for small businesses and using VDI are comparable. Depending on your application usage and your need, it might be a little more over a 3 to 5 year span than if you bought and owned and upgraded and managed everything yourself. It's generally less, sometimes as much as 30-40% less. But even if it's break even or a little more for you and your specific use case, you're getting a higher level of service than you would if you were building this infrastructure or operating in a traditional environment or building this infrastructure on site. And so the resilience, the performance, the security all help, when you look at cost, define a much better value in small businesses for VDI, and can take a lot of concerns and worries off your plate, particularly as more businesses are being subject to information security and privacy regulations and are higher risk there as well. The question is, can we get users on Chromebooks to connect to VDIs? Yes, there are VDI client applications designed to run that connect into the VDI services that we've been talking about, that run on Chrome devices. Additionally, you can access through the browser as well. And accessing through the browser, performance may not be as great. Screen resolution is typically smaller because you're looking at a desktop within a window, as opposed to sort of a native desktop mirroring. But for some users, that's sufficient. For others, you'll just want to use the agent that's available that runs as an extension in the Chrome environment, and to get that work in. So we covered a lot of ground and a lot of reasons why you should consider VDI. We're working with several companies now. You don't have to be a big enterprise to do this. We actually have a sole practitioner who's interested in VDI for herself, because she's worried that given that she travels a lot, if something goes wrong with her laptop, She would be able to basically borrow a computer at a hotel, business center, or anywhere and continue working, and not have to worry about running around someplace where she's not familiar, hoping to find someone who can fix it quickly. So the trip and her work continues and the trip is a waste. We're talking with companies with only 5 to 10 employees who, again, see this as a way to support remote users in a better way, have a standardized environment without having to buy or without having to buy computers for everyone, or having to figure out and get permission from every employee to put in the software they need to control and secure personal devices and manage them, and take on that headache and that inefficiency. Larger organizations use it because we've got a company with about 30 employees using it because they've got a key application that about half their employees need access to, but only a third of those are in it all day, every day. The rest need occasional access. So we're able to scale the server so those 5 employees can have access 7/24. And if a 6th or 7th person needs it, we scale up. It automatically provisions more resources. And when they're done using it, it waits a period of time to make sure no one else needs the resource, and then it shuts it down. And we're able to manage the cost. And we looked at a 5-year total cost of ownership, and we're saving them about 32% over having, if they had otherwise built that infrastructure to support that number of users themselves. So next step in your action as we get to the bottom of the hour here is 2 offers. One, if you're interested in this, best thing to do is book a Cloud Advisor session. It's no obligation, it's free. The initial call will be brief. We'll get information. We'll do some initial questions about your interest. And if you want to pursue it further, we'll schedule more detailed requirements meetings, and we'll talk about options in more detail. You can scan the QR code or use the bit.ly CG intro call URL there. You can also contact us by email or phone. My contact information is on the screen as well. Just know that I'm not really good about answering the phone. I'm often in do not disturb mode, and I'm horrible about checking voicemail. So send me an email. I don't have an assistant. If I can't answer quickly, I will have someone on my team get back to you in short order. So I appreciate you joining us here today. So we'll wrap up. Again, feel free to contact us. At this point, I'm going to go. I want to thank everyone for joining us, whether you're live or watching the recording. I am going to go stop the recording, and then I'll hang around for a few moments if anyone has any additional questions. Thank you, and have a great day.